So to do this in Dashboard, first thing we're going to do is in Dashboard, we are going to go into our preferences. So obviously in Windows it's in a little bit different place. But then you want to go to Smart GPI Listener. Smart GPI is actually Rosstalk, and you want to make sure that it's enabled. And in this case, it's listening on port 7788. That's the default port that we set up on the switcher side as well. If you're already using this port on this PC for some reason, say you're running this application on the same control surface as your expression, if you had one, you would then need to use a different port because expression would probably already be using port 7788 for the expression application's Rosstalk connection from the switcher. But for this instance, we'll say that we're running this dashboard panel on a separate PC than something that would be using Rosstalk currently. So we'll say it's port 7788. Make sure it's enabled and click OK. So now when you go into the panel builder, you'll see that, for example, the play button, if I edit that play button, when it opens up, you'll see this here, a GPI trigger. So now what you're able to do is you'd be able to put a 1. So now when the GPI command for GPI 1 is sent to this control panel from the Carbonite production switcher, that will tell this panel to press the play button and send it to your hyperdeck that you've already set up and applied this for. Apply changes and close to set it up. Some quick clips is you could always come and say, okay, I'm going to draw in a little grid. We want a table, and inside of here we're going to, maybe I'll draw a little table, and we're going to say I want say 4 by 4, and we're going to say fill it with buttons and click OK. So now you can make these buttons into individual clip IDs. So by knowing your clip ID, you could actually make this button similar to using the Q clip. When I look at the Q clip, the Q clip command, when we look at this, is we could copy this button, which is saying, send this message, send message stop, and then go to, clip ID. If we copied and pasted this, we could ignore the Q clip ID and then just specify what the clip ID actually is. So for the example of our own script modifying of this button, what we'll do is we'll take this data and we will copy it, and then what we'll do is I'll go to this button and I'll say, okay, this is GPI trigger 2, and then we can add, say, OG script, and we are going to paste. So now what you'll see is that same information as before, only we're now going to get rid of the clip ID, and then here we would put in, for example, clip name. So the clip name as stored on the system. So if I did this for all those buttons, then what you could do is it would queue those clips up. There's probably a loop command, and so we'll just name this clip 1, whatever you would name the button, but it would use GPI trigger 2. So now that could be triggered by 2. So that would queue up the clip, and then sending the 1 will play the clip. Okay, so for clips though that we would want to loop, we are going to need to add the loop command. Now, since you can't set the unit to loop and then press play, you actually have to send the play with loop command. So it's a separate command of having to go ahead and build it as part of the OG script. We can add another parameter. So this is after the Q command. We could add we could even add a pause of, say, in frames. We'll say 30 frames per second. So we'll say, you know, add a 10 frame pause, and then go ahead and it'll recalculate that for you. And then we're going to add that Rostock message to say okay to whatever the Blackmagic deck is, and we're going to go to custom. And so here you would put in play : space loop : space true. So now what'll take place is, now when we trigger GPI 2, it's actually going to send not only the cue but also the play. So for clips that I'm going to want looping, like backgrounds or animations or on-set monitor feeds, when you're sending this, it doesn't have to go as soon as you first take it to air, because it's in a looping mode, so it should be okay. In which case you can, you know, trigger this and then go to air when you feel like it after taking it from the switcher. So I go ahead and I hit menu. Right? We want to go into the system menu, go into the device config, and now we want to scroll all the way to the left, and you'll see that you can add new. So we're going to click add. It'll automatically give you the first available slot ID. The slot ID is just a number within the system that it uses for referencing the device to the input. So the slot is really just a placeholder. It's a, you know, virtual remote port. So the type is Rostock. Then we hit next. Subtype is expression. We hit next. And so the IP address, this is where we specify that IP address that we want to do. So the first one will change the whether it's IP address. The middle knob is the field that I'm looking at. So we want to go to 10.20. Change my field. .30, and it is ballistic sensitive, so you can scroll pretty quick. 10, 20, 30, 10, I believe. Is that what it was? 10, 20, 30, 10. So, yeah, we can wrap around. So, 10, 20, 30, 10. We hit next, and now we're getting to the extra options. So the port is 7788, and again, we set the listener up to listen on that IP address, because that's where my dashboard panel is, for port 7788, so we don't have to change it. Now what we've got is the pre-roll value. So depending on the device, this is what you can put in if you're going to use the roll clip type functionality. Now the roll clip functionality does allow you to essentially enable that button, and when you go to take that source to air, this will send the play command, which will specify what that command is, and then wait this duration before taking it to air. That way accommodating the amount of time it takes from the command to go out of the Carbonite into the dashboard PC, and then the dashboard PC relaying that, plus the actual time from when the device receives this command to actually start playing the media. So you'll be able to dial this up and play with that value. Now, if you're planning on using it like a server, so a background device that, you know, we're going to take to air, that roll clip functionality works really well. If instead what we're going to do is we're going to use this as a controlled device for doing things like animated wipes and transitions, where it's actually going to be layered in a keyer, and everything's going to be triggered off of a custom control macro, both the cue and the play, then it's probably best that we don't put any value on this, and that in fact we disable roll clip altogether for this device. So that way the roll clip will have no impact and it'll never send a command. Now, if we are using it as a clip player, then you would leave that on, and then what comes up is which command do we send? The default is next because that's for expression, but then you can come in and you can specify the GPI number. So if we attach, say, GPI 99 to the play button, then I could go ahead and say, okay, GPI 99 is my play button, and that's the command that I want to put into the into that button. So it'll automatically send it and send the play command for me. But again, if we're setting it up to be used in a keyer for animations or transitions, I will manually insert that GPI 99 when I build my custom control macro. So now that we've set this up, and we've got our roll clip off, pre-roll port 778. So now that we've set that up, we go ahead and we click on a knob to confirm this addition. So now we can go into our config, click on our input, and we can scroll to the desired input. So in this case, if I was hooking it up to the Blackmagic Design application, then what we would want to do is go ahead and make this the device. So we hit the next button, the device menu comes up, we can click on it, we can now scroll to our 4 because it's pretending to be an expression, and we go ahead and we click and confirm. Go ahead and add it to our bus, and I'll just put it on a shifted side for now, wherever the BBS is. So there's our BMD, so our Blackmagic Design, whatever you wanted to name your hyperdeck. So now when we go to that shifted side, all right, and we take that source, you'll see that the menu switches. So now you can toggle next until you get to the GPI menu, or if you're here, hold down next and it'll go the opposite direction in the menu. And so now you can insert those triggers. So I select, GPI 1 for my my shot box, first clip, and I go ahead and I would click trigger, and that would send out the cue command. So if I wanted to build this as a custom control, where I will, just cue it up into a custom control, what I would want to do is say, okay, not only would I want to cue it up, but I want to make sure it also goes to preset, and that I could transition cleanly to it. So it's really easy to do. I just kind of go to my custom control menu, take a blank custom control. So in this case, this one right here would be available. So bank 4, custom 22. And we start recording. So now I would select it on my program ME's preset bus. So it goes to that menu automatically for me. I would double tap the background bus in the transition area, which will include any active keyers. Pick my transition type if I want. In this case, we'll do a dissolve. And because the roll clip is enabled, right, if we had that setting turned on for the Blackmagic device, which is probably, if I'm using it in this type of use case where it's for background clips, that would be the best item. So in the menu, I go ahead and I say, I want to trigger GPI 1 to, or GPI 2, whatever button I've added that clip to in the dashboard app. So when I trigger that, that will now send the cue command
to the Blackmagic, because essentially it routes it through that application. So now that it routed that through the application, and it queues it up. So I'd want to insert a pause. Hold down insert and on the key bus of whatever number of frames it seems works well for it to queue up the clip repetitively and safely. So for now, we'll just put in 25 frames. And of course, you might be able to bring that, that value down. So now that it's queued it up, it paused for 25 frames. Roll clip is enabled, and then again with the roll clip function, it will send that play command, whatever we specified to be the GPI trigger for our play button. It'll send that to the dashboard app. The dashboard app will play it, and then the switcher, though, will wait that pre-roll time before actually performing the transition. So again, we hit, the auto trans. It sent the play command. It dissolved because right now we just set it to 0. You'll have to ratchet it up once you figure out what the value needs to be. And I go ahead and I stop recording. Now we can go through our macro, and we can see. So the first step was select that device on ME2's preset bus, and it will record the first background press, and the second background press, that's when it inserts the trans clear function. So I can always go and say, okay, well, delete that event because I don't need that first event because it does have the trans clear. Now here I selected dissolve. Now I accidentally put the wrong, pressed a button to change a menu to the wrong device, so I'll just delete that button press. I don't need this extra button press. It was just that the order in which I pressed the buttons meant that the menu changed on me. So I can go ahead and delete that event as well, just to keep my events to a minimum. You can see here that it sends out slot 4, so that's where you get that ID linking, GPI number 2. So it sends the GPI command for GPI number 2. Pauses for 25 frames, right? And then it's pressing the ME2 auto. So in this case, it's not only the cue, but it's the cue, play, take it to air. So it's the whole thing all in one. So that's essentially how you program the macro on the switcher side to trigger that event.